Hello, everyone. Baseball is back. My team still sucks. And welcome into another Friday night of comic book talk. This is Krackle Comics coming to you live on YouTube. My name is Dan, and I'm joined by my two illustrious hosts.
Mike.
And Vincent.
You know, yeah, for someone who doesn't like doing the intro, it was a good intro.
Don't give him too much credit.
I think I saw it.
All right. I've got a quick haul. It's probably not going to be quick. I've got some fun.
2 minutes.
All right. So for those following, here, make my screen big, dude. For those following comic book related news, you may have heard that Dark Horse has officially lost the licenses for Aliens, Predator, and I guess technically Prometheus, if anyone cares about that. So even though I know Marvel's going to reprint everything Dark Horse ever did, just like they've done with Star Wars, with Conan, I impulse purchased a couple of things. So this is Aliens, the Essential Comics Volume 1, and I believe it's the only volume. Jeez. This is way thicker than I thought. It's hard to tell online. And so this is basically the first 3 miniseries of Dark Horse's Alien stuff going back to 1988 through 1992. And this is like 350 pages. No like crazy interesting creators here if you're not familiar with the material. And then also the first volume of the Predator one. And this is the first, same thing, first 3 miniseries, around 350 pages, and the never before collected adaptation of Predator 2. But Predator, actually both books are weird because the comics started coming out before any film sequels came out. So they're like kind of alternate continuity in place of Alien 3, in place of Predator 2 or whatever. And then 2 smaller Alien things. The one book that I'll probably add to that is there's like an Aliens versus Predators Essential Comics Volume 1, which is a little bit trickier to find right now, but I'll probably grab that. And I need to look a little bit more into some of the DC crossovers, which they recently did reprints together. And then 2 smaller trades, relatively recent series. I think this is the order that they came out. Here's Aliens Dead Orbit, which is written and drawn by James Stokoe, who has a very unique art style. I feel like we saw him on Something Mine or somewhere. We've probably mentioned his name at some point, but he's a cool dude. And then Aliens Dust to Dust, written and drawn. Actually, is it drawn by him? I think it is. Written and drawn by Gabriel Hardman, who's also a cool dude. And then just while I'm at it, because I'm going to shelf all these and I'm, rushing to get a lot of the Dark Horse stuff before it all disappears and Marvel does it differently. So I figured I'd show some of the 2 other Alien books that I own. And here's Alien Salvation, which is another cool, pretty thin, very affordable standalone book. And this is art by Mike Mignola. So definitely one of the highlights of the Dark Horse era. Unfortunately, it's a premiere hardcover, which is not going to match the formats of all the others. So maybe I'll downgrade. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm crazy. And then I have here Alien, the Illustrated Story. And this is not published by Dark Horse, and it was not originally published by Dark Horse. This was originally some kind of project through Heavy Metal, I believe. But this edition is through Titan. And this was an adaptation of the original film released around that time, I believe, like 1979 or so. And this is art by Archie Goodwin. No, that is totally backwards. Adapted by Archie Goodwin, art by Walter Simonson. So this is really cool. And it's got like, I don't know, I guess the colors are kind of interesting, what you'd expect from Heavy Metal. So that's the one half of what I'm going to show. And the other half is I recently received the Silver Age Legion of Superheroes Omnibus Volume 3. And I point this out only because I think it's interesting to highlight that someone pointed out to me that the final sentence on the back, because how often do you guys actually read this little text, especially if it's not identical to what is like online in the Amazon description, which it's not always identical. But this specifically says, this final omnibus volume finishes out the Legion's Silver Age. So 2 question marks there. Well, one statement obviously finishes out the Silver Age. But the question marks is this the final omnibus volume, or is this the final Silver Age omnibus volume? Because basically these omnibuses are obviously reprinting material that was previously collected in the defunct DC Archives line, obviously much more consolidated, about 3 volumes each in one of these. And I think this gets up to around volume 9 or so. And I don't know. I'm not going to bother with the exact numbers, but there's a chunk of material between where this ends and where this picked up, because DC randomly put out this standard size hardcover a couple of years ago. And the purpose of this, which has a second volume and is now going to have 2 more volumes with a slightly different title, which then connects up to the Levitz and Giffen run with The Curse and Heart of Darkness. This volume was meant to pick up directly after where the archive stopped. So there's now a gap between these 2 books. And that gap is actually one of the very interesting eras of Legion, because that's when you have moved past the Silver Age, as noted, and you have art from Dave Cockrum, who then leaves to go do X-Men and takes Nightcrawler with him, and I think Sword of Storm. I don't remember the specifics of that. And then after Dave Cockrum leaves, you have Mike Grell. So that I'm not certain on the writing and what actually happens and if people like the stories, but at least in terms of art, that was one of the peaks of the Legion, alongside the very early Silver Age stuff, from people like Kurt Swan and Jim Shooter, and then the later, Keith Giffen and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm interested to see what DC does with Legion next. And I guess I'm interested to see what Marvel does with Aliens, but I'm not really, like, the first teaser image they put out is like the Predator with Iron Man's helmet from like David Finch or something, and I don't give a fuck about that. But that's my haul.
It's finally over. I do have a question though. Is the Xenomorph now a Disney princess? Yes.
Well, no. Aren't they all males except for the queen? And she's a queen, not a princess.
You can't tell.
What do you mean? I'm pretty sure that's the lore. I think they're like supposed to be like bees and stuff.
Predator and Alien are now Disney princesses.
Sure.
You heard it first. Dan, we would talk about comics, remember?
Yes, we were. So our first issue kicking off this week is Amazing Spider-Man Sins Rising Prelude #1, written by Nick Spencer with art by Guillermo Sana. The issue opens to a backstory on the Sin Eater, or Stanley Carter, for anyone who wants to know his real name, talking about his parents. So his father died a drug abuser just before his mom became pregnant with him. So we kind of get a little bit of his upbringing. He was then raised by his priest, I guess, like either a priest or kind of like some, like, I don't know, preacher or whatever, of a grandfather who died from like a snake bite at like a sermon one time or something. And later one night, I guess the ritual that they go by is they place the dead grandpa out with like these like food offerings for the Sin Eater to come and kind of feast on him. So we see a young Stanley actually observing this like Sin Eater coming to feast on the dead grandpa. So we kind of get like a little bit of an introduction with him to this type of character. So the next day, his mom comes back to take him away back to New York City. And then we kind of fast forward pretty far into the future where he's actually attending his police partner's funeral. I think he served a little bit with S.H.I.E.L.D., and then he transitioned over to working in the police department. So he's in the rain, and he's basically like on a mission now to kind of find out who is responsible for his partner's death. So he kind of walks into a bar and sees a news bulletin that kind of shows the death of Jean DeWolf, which I still haven't read yet, so forgive me for not really knowing the background on that yet. But I guess for some reason, Jean also walks into the bar and talks to Stan, and they end up sleeping together. I don't know if that's the same Jean. It probably is. This might all just, I think the way this issue ends, it's all just kind of a dream. But yeah, he ends up sleeping with Jean and finds out that she's the one who is doing the investigation on his partner's death. So he's a little bit frustrated that he's not part of that investigation, but for reasons because he's the partner, they don't want him getting involved because there's might be too much emotion or whatever with it. But anyway, he stops by a judge's house to find an address for the investigation that's going on, and then we get kind of a breakdown of the Senator's long history of killings and also referring back to Spider-Man's involvement in it. And I'm sure my co-host will kind of explain a little bit more about the Senator's background after I'm done talking about the synopsis. But yeah, we get some scenes of him shooting and fighting, and he's actually brought out to like this late night show stage, kind of like reminiscent of the Joker. I know it's kind of cringe to say that, but Stan finds out that he was a sin eater this whole time, and he's the one who's been causing all this, all these killings and done all this stuff. And I guess he's kind of coming to grips with it. And what's really cool too is we kind of get like a panel from, I guess, the original Sin Eater storyline. Looks like it's back in like the mid '80s. I can't. I'm trying to remember if I read this or not because it sounds familiar, but I don't know if I read it. Where they actually find Stan dead because he's having like an identity crisis or something. And the last thing we kind of see is that Kindred has recruited the Sin Eater, I believe, to help with his plans and tracking down Spider-Man. So a little bit of kind of background and setup for stuff to come, but I don't really have a lot of background on this character, but it was still kind of interesting to read. And some of the scenes, especially towards the end of the book, I thought were pretty well drawn. That's all I got.
I think this provided some good background and context for the event that'll happen. And Dan, I know last week you were kind of scared that, oh no, maybe this is going to be some horrible crossover that pulls in like all the Spider-Man titles. Nope, that came out and Reddit said it. It's from what? The next issue of Amazing, which is 845 to 849, and 845 is going to be oversized, and then issue 50 will be 850 for that celebration. So it actually, 44 to 49. So there we go there. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It was really kind of cool to see the full out pages just lifted. And I think Spencer has come out and said how much of the Peter David run from Spectacular he likes, so he's lifting from it, and I'm excited to see what they do with the Sin Eater, as it sets the tone forward for when we get to Kindred, which we'll eventually get to after this, it looks like.
Well, that's why I haven't read it, because it was in Spectacular, so that's why I wasn't familiar. So, okay, cool.
Yeah, this is a pretty trippy issue. Like Dan, I wasn't 110% following it along the way. The art is quite great, both in the trippy scenes and otherwise. But the best 2 pages of the book are the ones that they literally lift directly from Spectacular Spider-Man number 136 by Peter David and Sal Buscema. And I thought it was a little weird that they kept in basically the next issue tag. It's like next issue, the tarantula, which you think they'd edited that out, but I guess they're going really meta with it, which kind of fits the overall premise of this issue. And then there's an editorial in the back, which I think is kind of interesting. It references this as a dark Spider-Man story alongside Kraven's Last Hunt, which Spencer already did his sequel to, Shed, which he kind of already did his sequel to, and obviously this is Death of Jean DeWolf. And but I'm just going to be an asshole and say that I kind of wish, rather than reading Amazing Spider-Man 44 or whatever after this, I wish I was reading Spectacular Spider-Man number 137 with the tarantula, which would be the first issue of Jerry Conway's run and Return to Spider-Man.
You don't have to be that way. I'm just saying.
Kind of.
I mean, also, like, you could read that next if you have it available to you.
Well, I technically do, because they did reprint it, but then they didn't put it out a second volume.
Okay.
Yeah, the Tombstone collection.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, that's right. All right, so moving on here, a little Dan rock block going on here, but Batman, The Adventures continue, Chapter 8, Issue 8, whatever you want to call it. I'm sorry, The Adventures Continue. I think I said that. But anyway, written by Alan Burnett and Paul Dini with art by Ty Templeton. So we open to Batman and Azrael fighting, I guess his name is Wing, and the Penguin. So Batman subdues Wing while Azrael gets the information from Penguin before tossing him off a balcony, which Batman kind of has to intervene and save him. He's like, dude, what the hell? Like, stop trying to kill people, because that is what Batman does. He does not kill people. Just putting that out there for people. So by that time, Azrael has left, so Batman kind of has to go chasing for him as well. And from afar, we see someone spying on Batman. My co-hosts are probably going to correct me on who that is because I don't know who it is. But anyway, Azrael goes to the address provided by the Penguin, where he runs into Mr. Freeze, of all people, who is attempting to use a formula to revive his dead wife. She's not frozen and has cancer. She's actually fully dead. So, and Batman gets to the same address and finds Azrael is frozen, and he has to face off against Freeze, who he beats him soundly and tries to talk some sense into Mr. Freeze by telling him that, like, she's not coming back from this. Like, she's literally dead. Like, you're not going to be able to revive her from this formula you've created. So he ends up beating him, breaking his little, like, glass, like, ice thing that he kind of has. And later on, we get Bruce and Azrael kind of walking through a church, lighting a candle, and I guess just a little bit of, like, reflection on everything and thanking Bruce for saving him. And the last page kind of just shows a teaser of Joker coming next issue. I really do like the art here by Ty Templeton. Obviously, this is really reminiscent of the animated series, and just a really, really, like, light read. Not a lot of heavy storylines and stuff to really look into here, but it's just a fun book to read, and definitely want to maybe collect this at some point if it ever gets collected. DC, you never know. But what do you guys think of this?
Well, Vince didn't read this, so he won't chime in at all. And then he'll just be annoyed, and we'll probably talk about the Joker design for New Batman Adventures being bad, but it's the one from Justice League they're using. So it's the semi-good one. Before you rant about it, I'll say that. But I felt this was kind of uneven. Like, all right, they beat Wing, and then Azrael just beat the shit out of the Penguin off the page, which was very fast that happened. I have to say, though, that the entire sequence with Freeze, I think we're getting into retcon territory for what happens with Freeze. So to brush you up on what happened, there was a movie called Sub-Zero, which all revolves around Freeze finally completing the formula and curing his wife.
Okay.
And then what happened is that, and then she learned about all the things Freeze did. So then she just left him. She went to go live her life elsewhere and got away from Victor, which sent him into a depression. So in New Batman Adventures, somehow he cut his head off, and he's just a severed head who has, like, the robot suit. So he's just, which is why he has that new design. And he eventually shows all the way up in Batman Beyond because he's essentially immortal by that point. But yeah, but seeing his wife dead, I know he, in that episode of Batman Beyond, he visits his wife's grave, but I thought she, like, lived a full life at that point, but maybe something. So I feel like it's retconning, but yeah, the moment of Batman breaking the glass tube for Freeze is, like, completely lifted from the Batman Vengeance video game, which was a tie-in to the New Batman Adventures. And, like, full out, it's the same thing that happens when you fight Mr. Freeze in that game. The cutscenes, like, he breaks the thing, he's like, I can't breathe because heat. And then Batman just grabs the gun and freezes it. So that was weird to see. It was like, I've seen this, and I don't know if that's a callback or just, like, coincidence. I don't know what it is, but, like, that's directly lifted from that. I did like the incorporation of Freeze, because Freeze has the kind of this long-standing history in the animated universe, as that's where he got his remake to the story and origin that everyone now knows for Mr. Freeze, at least the famous one. And incorporating the Shroud for reincarnation that Azrael was trying to track down, that was pretty cool. Azrael, I felt, was like, blink and you miss it. Chapters 7 and 8 are essentially one entire episode of the animated series, if you want to look at it that way, which totally works. But I feel like this one just felt pacing. It went very, very fast, while the first chapter went very, very slow. So, like, I highly recommend reading chapters 7 and 8 directly all together, as it would just be kind of like one issue. Standard says 11 pages, then you get 22. So there's that. And when you're only working with 11 pages, sometimes the pacing is going to be a little wonky. But Paul Dini and Alan Burnett doing Joker next intrigues me. I am a little annoyed though that we got to this book to get away from Joker War, but yet the Clown Prince of Crime still manages to find us somewhere. Like we can't get away from him. And I don't know if this is like the timing of that just synced up or whatever, but it's slightly annoying, I will say. And then finally, Dan, you don't remember it, but the guy who's following them, you don't remember. Remember, that's Jason Todd. That's the whole thing. Jason Todd's going to come into this.
I figured that's who it was.
But yeah, so that's the happenings in animated Batman that's continuing of their adventures.
I like it though.
No, I like it. It was just I felt this one was just disjointed a little bit.
Yeah.
But moving into Daredevil, which, dude, this book continues to be good. Daredevil number 21, Chip Zdarsky, Marco Cicchetto. It's the aftermath of the Siege of Hell's Kitchen, and Matt's turning himself in for the murder he committed back at the beginning of Zdarsky's run. This issue, I'll say, essentially wraps everything together. Fisk shuts down any talk of him fighting alongside Daredevil and asks for the authorities just to take him away. And then he leaves with Wesley, and he gets a call from the Stromwyms. They're like, hey, we saw you clearly interfered in our plans, and we know about your kind of partnership, relationship with Typhoid Mary. So they're insinuating that Typhoid Mary is going to come back, which I would be not surprised if that happens, as Zdarsky clearly has set her up for something more down the line. Matt asks Detective Cole North to take him to the station, as he wants the detective that originally was tasked with bringing him in to bring him to the station to turn him in. So that brings that full circle. He also, like, North expects him to just be like, you want me to drive you so you can just escape? And he's like, no, I'm going here. But they're stopped by Foggy, and he stops the police cruiser, and he's talking sense to Matt, saying, hey, if you go here, your identity's gonna be revealed. So we can't do that. Just think about that for a second. But Foggy's going to act as Daredevil's counsel because Foggy has a plan that he makes with Cole, with the DA of New York. So while they're telling the plan to the DA, Matt runs back to his apartment to get his full Daredevil costume because he's just kind of in the wife beater and the mask because he wasn't in costume when the siege happened. And he's approached by Spider-Man, who's like, hey, you were in costume again, and I told you if I see you, I'm bringing you down. But then, like, Matt full stops and it's just like, hey, so you weren't there. And he also just, like, full out calls him. He's like, where were you when this happened? Because you weren't anywhere around to help, and I was the only hero here and saved the city. And then also points out that Spider-Man has put many more people in the hospital and caused the deaths of others by accident than Daredevil. So Spider-Man shouldn't have any fair say in who gets to put on a mask and go around, which I really liked that scene because I thought Spider-Man was being a little forceful way back at the beginning of the run with his warning to Daredevil. And Daredevil just fully is like ready for a fight to square up. And then Pete leaves when he's like, hey, I'm turning myself in. He's like, all right, I believe you, but if you're lying, I'll be back. And then our final kind of act plays out with Daredevil in the DA's office going against their thing, because Foggy's thing is like, which is a standard thing now in the Marvel Universe, superheroes can testify as a witness, so they should be able to be tried as a citizen then privately to keep their identities and loved ones and family hidden, which, all right, for superhero comics, I can buy that. Real world, I don't see how that happens at all. But yeah, the plan is that Daredevil will go to trial as Daredevil, not as Matt Murdock. But the DA definitely wants to see who he is before they push ahead, which is the moment where the DA, who was once partners with Matt Murdock and Foggy Nelson, he sees it's Matt Murdock, and he's like horribly disgusted by it, and he's like, dude, get out of here, take him away, lock him up. And from this moment onward, the book will never be the same, as we're left with those words. Marco Cicchetto, fantastic as always. Chip Zdarsky knocking this run out of the park since issue 1. I'm wondering where we see it go. Are we going to get an arc that's reminiscent of Matt being in prison from the beginning of Brubaker's run? I have no idea what we're going to see, but we still have loose threads. We got Typhoid Mary. We have the stuff with Fisk and the Stromwyms around, and I'm very kind of intrigued to see where we go with this. Dan, how do you feel about Daredevil number 21?
Well, first off, this series is definitely getting out of this. No
Yeah,
doubt about that, because this series it's too good to not get one. Yeah, this issue is just loaded with stuff. I mean, you have the Kingpin kind of, fearing the worst about everything that went down and actually getting an uptick in approval, which I think is kind of cool to see. The whole Spider-Man scene, I think, was just excellently handled. Peter, they use him pretty well in this run. Not, in the right tone that I think they should be using him in for a Daredevil book. And my only question for you, Mike, is that like like when he revealed his identity to this DA, he was kind of saying that like, if people find out about my identity, that all these like suits and all these like things will be overturned. Like I
yeah.
thought that was kind of like his blackmail toward this guy to like not reveal
Oh
his
yeah, it
identity.
totally was.
So why did
The,
he still arrest him?
uh, no, remember he's arresting Daredevil because that's why he can't
Oh, okay.
put him as Matt Murdock because as the DA, then he would be complicit because every case Matt tried as a lawyer would have to get thrown out because he can't be a lawyer and also a vigilante,
Yeah, but
especially when stopping crimes that he was trying as a lawyer.
that's
So
just so weird that they're gonna arrest him as Daredevil. Like they're never gonna take off his mask at all.
I don't know, Vince. You know about the witness thing testifying as that's a Spider-Man thing, right? That's where that started.
I mean, it's been a thing in the past, but the thing that's being referred to here is from the Charles Soule Daredevil run, I
Okay.
believe. Again, I didn't read this issue. I didn't read the Charles Soule Daredevil run, but I think that was a major part of Charles Soule's run. Charles Soule either currently still or in the past has worked as an actual lawyer. Obviously, Daredevil, obviously there's an opportunity for law in that book. And so, yeah, Charles Soule did something.
Do you feel that statute makes sense for the Marvel universe? I can go with it. It's hokey, but like I can go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of silly, but I don't know. You don't think about it too much.
And
Yeah, because I feel like that's the only thing that's kind of separating that from like becoming a Bendis or like everywhere kind of rip off of like, oh, this is his identity and this is Matt Murdock, and they even reference it like in the issue like that. All these people will die if I reveal my identity, and I'm just
yeah.
like, yeah, we've seen it
Well, I
before.
know in Souls they used the Purple Children to make it so his identity wasn't public anymore. But that was the whole identity thing has been a thing going on since Bendis, and
Mhm.
I know Zdarsky is finding a way to keep it fresh and interesting, but I am kind of bored of that trope at this point.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm nitpicking here, but kind of a thing going back to Roy Thomas with Mike Murdock,
Yeah, that's true.
which Charles Soule also, included in his reveal stuff or resolution. And then obviously it was done before Bendis as well in the 90s with Fall from Grace, and I forget what his fake identity was at that point. Or I guess he didn't use one. The whole concept was Matt Murdock died.
Yeah, and then he was just always Daredevil.
My one thing is, I'm, if it happened, you guys would have mentioned it, but I'm assuming when Matt and Peter have the conversation, they don't specifically refer to Jean DeWolf or Sin Eater.
No, they don't.
Okay, because that would entirely fall in line with that conversation and would be some neat continuity.
It would be, but like, I mean, Matt's accusation totally fits. Like, you can pull Jean DeWolf, you can pull Sin Eater, but also like Gwen Stacy, you can pull that as well. So
Yeah, I mean,
it totally fits. I
you can
mean,
list a dozen of them.
Empyre, as we get into the dominating part of our week, where everything else was an Empyre book.
Or X-Men. Yes, Empyre #2, written by Al Ewing and Dan Slott, art by Valerio Schiti. We learn here that the Kotati first experimented with their new weaponry and tactics on the Krellian scrolls, which is unfortunate. Those are the scrolls who like pretend to be humans just for like role play, kicks and giggles. Some of them are the cosmic 1920s gangster scrolls, which are like one of my favorite things. Kotati is taunting the Avengers who stayed on Earth, or stayed on the moon actually. And Thor's hammer saves the day again, kind of. And then Sequoia says "et tu, Thor," and I'm like, that's stupid. Don't say that line. I don't care if you're a character created by Steve Englehart. You can't say that. So Koi and the Katati just run away now that the Avengers have freed themselves from their vine traps. And the Katati are now launching a full invasion on Earth, at least. That's what we're focusing on so far. While the heroes regroup and re-ally, and everyone realizes, hey, we're all assholes and idiots. We got to work together now. The the whole plant shenanigans, we do get a cool concept and moment where the plants are kind of burrowing in and seeing themselves in the Thing, who is kind of sort of made of rocks. Don't think too hard about the anatomy. But Hulkling's sword cuts up plants, so they're all good. And then Carol gets stabbed in the face by the sword and absorbs the sword's energy, and then Nova's style and all the plants are gone from the immediate area, all the main characters. And then she gets handed Ronin's hammer and and she gets a Kree palette swap. She's now in her green costume, which is close to what she wears in part of the movie. And then the issue just ends I felt very anticlimactically. That's just it, basically. I guess technically it's everyone more fully. Sequoia gets to spill more of his dumb villain plan just right in front of the Avengers. The Avengers get free. Everyone regroups and re-allies. And so now this is the space where we can fit a shitload of tie-ins, which we're about to talk about. I'll point out that Ronin died in Donny Cates' Death of the Inhumans. And then I should probably note this after the next couple of books, but I'll note it here. So we're about to talk about a bunch of tie-ins. They're either miniseries, Empyre, blank, 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 or one-shots and things like that. But just imagine how you could do this event otherwise. You could organically tie into it. You could devote one issue or max 2 issues or literally just one page in most of the regular series showing, say, characters dealing with the invasion of the plants on the Earth. And it would be just like Inferno. Suddenly Spider-Man has an issue or there's an Avengers issue where Jarvis is running around dealing with all the appliances being corrupted by demons. And it's just a quick tie-in, one issue, it's fine. Obviously, all the Spider-Man books had 3 issues each to tie in. So even back then, things were stupid. But another example would be something like the Casket of Ancient Winters, which flowed out of Walt Simonson's run on Thor. And a lot of those were very subtle. You just have an issue of any random series, and it's like, oh, there's a fucking snowstorm everywhere. Go read Thor. Or in some of the early Crisis tie-ins where it was very subtle, and it's just like, oh, the sky's fucking red. That's crazy. And you could do something like that rather than 40 issues across miniseries and one-shots, while all the regular series, like the ones that we're reading today, just completely ignore this and focus on the fact that they're in the middle of their overlong, written-for-the-trade story arcs. So, Amazing Spider-Man is not going to reflect anything in Empyre. He's going to focus on his 5-part Sins Past thing, which with an oversized one-shot, an oversized first issue, an oversized last issue, all to fit in one trade for $20. But I'm sure there's going to be a Empyre Spider-Man one-shot or miniseries on top of it. So fuck a Spider-Man fan. Fuck someone trying to follow Empyre and the regular books. Events are stupid.
I don't think events are stupid, but events are clearly broken. But this is definitely the issue where it's like, if you were playing a video game, this is where all your side quests come in.
Yeah.
For example, so all right, we get Cap going down to Earth, which we'll see him in Empyre Avengers as he's kind of at the war table trying to call out to the rest of the Avengers to help out. So okay, there's that side quest. Captain Marvel gets Ronan the Accuser's hammer, so she's going to be out in space with that. Boom, there's that one. And then whatever the hell Tony and Thor are doing. So this is all right, the Avengers get free, and then all right, here's where all the side quests happen. And I'm looking at a makeshift video game menu of just like, okay, what do I do first? Where you're just overwhelmed with everything at once. You get a little bit of that here. I do still like the event, and it feels like a big thing. And Vince, you are correct. There is going to be an Empyre Spider-Man miniseries that is 3 issues.
I mean, unless it was canceled, like a lot of the other tie-ins, which is
no, that one's still coming out. I think it's 3 weeks.
I'm sure they're not canceling the Spider-Man one, but that's a separate thing. It's like you stack up all these things that people, for better or worse, are like, oh, I want to see how Ghost Riders are interacting with Empyre, and it's like yank, no more. But yeah, just to clarify, I mean, this issue I thought was slow. It's totally a bridge issue. It's the way you explained it. And even the tease at the end, which I didn't really mention, is basically it's like, the Kree Skrull leaders are like, hey, Hulkling, this is my interpretation, like, hey, by the way, you might have to like nuke Earth in the course of this. But like, it's not like it's not fully clear what they're talking about. Yeah. And like, you don't get the full reaction from anyone else. And then it's like, to be continued. And I'm like, it was a very weak final page for me. But otherwise, I mean, the events, I'm enjoying the event so far. I like all the ties to continuity and the general premise and everything like that. I'm just nitpicking over the entire structure of events. And I have a similar comment later.
No, and I think that's a grievance that's well warranted. But let's let Dan chime in.
No, I mean, you guys pretty much said a lot of the stuff. I mean, I think with me, the biggest thing is that, like Mike said, kind of is this feels pretty much like Empyre Avengers. I mean, like it's kind of hard to distinguish kind of what's going on between those two books. And I guess right now, since we have the Avengers one like here, that it's a little bit hard to kind of split the hairs a little bit in terms of what we show in the main event book and what we're putting into Avengers, because they're so closely tied. But yeah, this definitely wasn't my favorite book of this week. I mean, definitely wasn't my favorite Empyre book either. So which is kind of sad.
No, it wasn't bad. Like when Empyre's 6 issue, what is this, 6 or 9 issues? I don't even know anymore. Like
12, no, it's kidding.
It might be.
Could be
13 with an Omega issue on the end of it. Who the hell knows?
And it'll get a hardcover in 3 months.
It'll get an omnibus in 12.
Exactly.
That War of the Realms omnibus with everything in it's coming. You can murder someone with it.
I'm not going to buy that.
It's going to be such a bloated book. But continue it. Like I think we all enjoyed this next book, though. Not just. By the way, we enjoyed Empyre #2, but you can't not ignore the literal video game side quests that pop into it.
Yes, definitely. So transitioning here into our first time book of Empyre here, we have Empyre Avengers #1, written by Jim Zub with art by Carlos Magno. So the issue opens to some setup in terms of explaining the battle between obviously the Kree Skrull alliance versus the Qatari, as Vince mentioned earlier. We are then seeing the Avengers planning their response to this battle. So again, kind of what we saw last issue. We have Vision and Dr. Nemesis meeting up with Luke Cage in Central Park, where some of the Qatari has kind of grown into the vegetation over there and has begun to spread. So Vision kind of is like, well, I can phase through this shit, so let me go down there and see what's going on. And while he's down there, he actually runs into a monster, and they're like, I'm going to destroy you. And that's kind of where we see it, the end of that. Meanwhile, out in Mexico, we have Quicksilver, Wonder Man, and Mockingbird, of all people. That's an all-star team there. Traveling out there to find some more Qatari Kree Skrull kind of battling going on. So seeing these Avengers show up, they kind of turn the tide of the battle and into the Kree and Skrull's favor. And seeing that the battle's won, the Kree and Skrull actually go to kill the Qatari. And the Avengers was like, whoa, like, you got to stop. Like, we're not killing these guys here. We're just trying to beat them and imprison them. And the Kree and Skrulls are like, they're trying to take our livelihood, so we're going to kill them. And that creates a little bit of fighting between the Avengers and the Kree Skrull factions down there. And everyone kind of gets subdued except for Wonder Man. He actually ends up like fighting back against them. So we kind of are left with that type of status quo over there. Back at the Avengers HQ, we see Cap talking to Black Knight, who's actually back here, Dane Whitman, which is nice to see. Always a big fan of his character. as well as finding out that the Katati are attacking the Savage Land. So Kazar is also there as well, and him, Scarlet Witch, and Black Knight are actually teleported to the Savage Land to support the battle going on over there. So they're ambushed coming right out of the gate, and they actually find out that I guess the Man Thing and Shana, I don't know how you say her name, have been kind of like brainwashed or fighting with the Katati. So that's kind of where we're left with this issue. But yeah, I really like this. I thought this was pretty good. The pacing was really good. It really like it's very reminiscent of like an old like I don't know. It kind of reminds me of like Operation Galactic Storm or like one of those like really cool like just everything's just going on and everyone's kind of different groups fighting. So I really liked it.
No, I agree. I had a lot of fun with this. Like the minute we saw Mockingbird and Wonder Man roll up, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna like this because
Yep.
this is our realm where we can play around with the characters that no one gets to use anymore. Because we're never getting Mockingbird in a movie. We're never gonna get Wonder Man in a movie, so we don't really use those characters anymore. We saw Black Knight literally just yamcha'd on the ground during War of the Realms, so it's actually nice that he's going to play a factor in here now, and not just be like dead on the ground. So, and I'm not even the biggest Black Knight fan, but he's got a long-standing membership with the Avengers. He should be thrown around some more. So I'm happy here. I don't even like the Savage Land that much, but it was like when Kazar and Zabu were there, and I was like, all right, I'm down for this. So I had a lot of fun with this. I think I like Jim Zub, and Vince. Jim Zub was one of those writers that on No Road Home, right? Part of that core, which the guy clearly is a fan of the Avengers, of the long-standing members, and I'd love to see him get an actual run with the main Avengers book, not like another offshoot, like of something like U.S. Avengers or what name of the like 9 other books there used to be.
Yeah, so that's the thing, is that this issue references and I assume overlaps with Jim Zub's fake Avengers book, Agents of Wakanda. The Agents of Wakanda team, whatever that means, I don't read that book. They appear in this, or they're referenced in this issue, and they were supposed to have their own tie-in miniseries, also written by Jim Zub to this, but that got canceled, presumably. I mean, he said as much, he assumes as much, as the actual series got canceled. So it's like, just focus your line. But I agree, it's nice seeing some of these more low-key Avengers. I think Jim Zub, for the most part, has a good handle on a lot of them. I'm going to nitpick and say the Steve McNiven cover here kind of sucks.
Cap's a little weird looking on it.
Yeah, and if you look at Black Knight, he's also really weird. And even like Scarlet Witch, her face, I don't know. McNiven's never doing interiors again, as far as I know. And I'm not impressed by his covers. So it's just like a John Cassidy situation where it's like, who cares? I'm just talking shit there, but to be honest, and also
you're not wrong, which is a disappointing thing because Civil War it might not be the greatest book, but that book is a beautiful book to look at. Also,
half the characters on the cover do not appear once in this issue, which is annoying. And that's kind of the thing is, especially the first couple issues, all these Empyre covers are dumb because the whole story is like a big twist in the first issue. So, they can't really relate the covers to anything in the story because everything has to be solicited 3 months in advance. So all the covers are just stupid, generic action shots. But I don't know why Dr. Nemesis is here. He's a mutant. He's a member of the X-Men who I don't think he's shown up in the Krakoa and Status Quo, to my recollection.
No, unless he's been behind something at like one of the bars or something on Krakoa. We have not seen him since.
And then very excited to see Black Knight here. But first of all, I don't know what they're doing with his costume. They tried to detail it up. He's got like some fur details and different armor. It looks bad. Number 2, there's an awkward scene where he's like referencing basically how he hasn't shown up recently. But he kind of has recently. But the last time he shows up, referenced and like maybe possibly even footnoted, was another unneeded miniseries tie-in not a tie-in to War of the Realms, but a tie-in flowing out of War of the Realms, a Punisher book. I guess he was a supporting character for Punisher. And it's like, oh yeah, you haven't seen me for a while. I was in this tie-in from the last major overblown event. But yeah, I mean, the cast of characters and the voices are fun. Obviously, I love the Savage Land and Kazar. I don't know how it works turning a man thing evil. Obviously, he's a plant thing, but like he's like this complicated cosmic dimension thing. And if you dare to touch him and you have, ignoble aims, you're going to just light on fire. And these guys are all plants. So I don't know how that works.
Is that a case of just like going with, oh, he's just Marvel's Swamp Thing, so he clearly might work the same? And I feel like, okay, is that kind of like what they're going with for it?
I mean, we'll see if Jim Zub bothers to, get into the weeds, pun intended. But it's just like
terrible pun.
It's just like, here is our one plant character. So, let's make him evil for the duration of this. But I mean, it's an enjoyable read. It's totally unnecessary. Like, this could be in an issue of Avengers in like 4 pages.
Yeah. Well, it's even weirder is that we're getting Captain America is getting his own Empyre book as well. Like, he's already at the war table. Like, what else is Cap going to do? I don't know.
It's going to be an issue of him walking around Avengers HQ, going to the bathroom.
It's going to be him walking around and getting into another fight and then pulled into back to the war table to be back in Avengers.
Yeah.
All right, Lords of Empyre. Lords of Empyre, Emperor Hulkling #1, which is Chip Zdarsky and Anthony Oliveira and Manuel Garcia, and inks on Cam Smith. Also notice that inker is credited here, not color artist. You don't really see that much out of Marvel's output now. It's usually artist and then color artist. So kind of cool to see inker back and thrown in there. But this is a one-shot part of the Lords of Empyre series where it's keying in on, well, one of the rulers of one of these alien races. But this is really honing in on Hulkling and Wiccan's relationship as it leads into Empyre. This takes place before Empyre #1, and really it spins and intersects with Incoming that we got, which feels like forever ago, back in January. And honestly, this feels much more fleshed out than what Incoming did, where Incoming was just like breakneck speed and gave like no actual like boundary, not boundary, but like context of why Hulkling has made his decision. So it's not, this fleshes out everything, and this helped a lot for me because I did not like Incoming, but this helped Incoming a lot. But I will say it begins the retelling of Teddy's birth and the flash to the current state of missing Billy as he's Wiccans with Strike Force, so he fakes that he's hanging out with Spider-Man. But David, who's Prodigy, and Tommy Speed take him to a bar to cheer him up, where they're approached by a Kree Skrull agent to recruit him for the throne. Then a fight breaks out with the sect of Skrulls attack, and they fight them off. And at this point, from that point on, it pretty much intersects with Incoming as we saw it. Wiccan shows up to help him out, and then things, like I said, play out pretty much the same. But on the Skrull warship, he meets the Tanalith the Pursuer and the Super Skrull, along with Captain Glory and Mergin, who we've already seen in Empyre. He visits the grave of Marvel, hoping to live up to his legacy of his father, but then he's attacked by Kree, who are against Teddy's no one dies pacifist ways that he wants to try to hammer in as he's going to take the throne. But then he's saved by Wiccan, who put a device in his engagement ring to teleport to him if he needed it. And then they're all mad at Wiccan because he interfered. So after this attack, Tanalith is like, hey, you need to cut all your ties with everyone on Earth and solely focus on this deal with the Katati that we're trying to prepare for. So he banishes Wiccan and cuts ties with them, but not really. As he's got his fingers crossed, and they telepathically speak later, and he's like, hey, once this cosmic craziness is over, I'll see you at home. And at least, like, okay, they're not fully broken up, which is good. But like, it is kind of weird to be like, I guess Wiccan's just sitting back in the apartment and not going to get involved in this. He'll clearly get involved probably at the end of this, but that's the way they play it off, which is very odd. Then we see Tanalith was a sleeper agent for the Kree, but ends up killing people that she was reporting to, as Teddy's reign is now the new dawn and fresh start for the Skrull and Kree alliance. So she's got her own motivations. So we already got Kree backstabbing Kree here. So like I said, this all takes place before Empyre #1. I think this fleshed out the relationship that Hulkling has and the kind of the choices that he had to make a lot more and make a lot more sense that led into Empyre, where it seemed like he was just going to do this because the plot demanded it. So I'll open it up. Thoughts on Lords of Empyre, Emperor Hulkling?
I thought it was all right. I mean, like you said, it kind of helps kind of build that motivation for why he kind of takes the position he does for this. I am curious though. Was this? I know we're kind of catching up on issues as they come out, but was this released the same week as all these other books, or were we back to weekly schedule release now? Or
yeah, this came out this week.
Okay, it's a little interesting that this wasn't released like earlier on, but I guess with the timing of everything, maybe they thought it was better to release it now. But
ideally, what would have worked best is if this came out the same week as Empyre #1. But I'm not going to criticize that because everything got moved around on release dates.
Yeah, that's what I figured. That's probably why it's doing that. But yeah, I mean, I think the characterization of the Kree and the Skrull here are pretty spot on. I mean, just kind of seeing those two kind of alien races back in a book. I mean, just throughout this whole thing that we talked about, it's kind of really cool to see. But yeah, other than that, I thought it was pretty good. I think the relationship between him and Wiccan is handled pretty good in this issue as well. It's definitely really cool to see that. So.
I like seeing Teddy rocking a Lila Cheney t-shirt and also having a, I would say, slightly poorly drawn Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
It may be a little rough for legal considerations. I think I have to reread Kieran Gillen's Young Avengers. Have either of you read it?
No, but I looked it up. I know Speed came out as bisexual in either that run or the one that happened after that. It's very recent, I think.
Yeah, I have to reread it because I thought it was like a plot thing, but whatever. I think the scene where Teddy visits Marvel's burial on Titan, I think that's really great. Those 2 pages, just like, I mean, it's like a nighttime scene. The colors are a little dark, and it's just that iconic, burial ground essentially, that his headstone or whatever it is, and it just instantly connects you back to Death of Captain Marvel. But yeah, and then the twist here is that it turns out that the Kree leader is a backstabber and is manipulating Teddy after all, of course, but that kind of annoys me. And I'm not sure when that'll pop up again.
It'll happen in Empyre #4. Just take your guesses when it's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think what will happen in the event is, they'll turn the tide and they'll beat the Katati, but then it's like, the Kree or the Skrull or both are going to make their move, and so then it is going to be Avengers versus Kree / and/or Skrulls with Teddy caught in the middle again.
I think we heard
that's a very predictable thing. That's almost certainly what's going to happen, but it's not quite what I want to happen. Like, I would kind of be okay if this was just like Kree and Skrull are like kind of cool now. Like, they don't like humans, but it's just everyone against stupid plants.
Well, they promised the universe will never be the same after this event, so maybe that would be certainly not be the same.
When nothing's ever the same, everything's the same.
That's true.
It'd be a crime if they screw that up.
Over here in Empyre X-Men #1 for another unneeded tie-in. This one is written by Jonathan Hickman and co-written by Tini Howard, art by Matteo Bufagni. What was I? Oh, so this whole issue, this whole miniseries, I presume, is kind of a jokey, gimmicky concept, and I'll get to that in a second. The Katati's staging ground for invading the continent of Africa and primarily Wakanda is the island of Genosha. And Scarlet Witch, meanwhile, in, I guess, a flashback, she's talking to Doctor Strange. And she's like, hey, I really fucked up with that whole House of M and decimation thing. And Doctor Strange is like, yeah, I mean, but you can't do anything about it. You're just going to fuck things up worse. But she decides to fuck things up worse. And I guess she resurrected a lot of the dead mutants from Genosha, and now they're zombies. And I don't know what happened to her, because the last we see of her, it's like people trying to wake her up, but they're clearly like through the lettering and everything. They're clearly these resurrected zombie people. So I don't know what's going on with Scarlet Witch, even though I'm pretty well, we saw her on the cover of that issue, but not actually in the issue. And then we skip forward to the Katati messing around with Genosha. And the gimmick story here is alien plants versus mutant zombies. So you've got aliens, you got mutants, and then you plants versus zombies. Angel, Magic, M, and Madrox. First, they are trying to deal with some dumb X-Men status quo stuff. And then they go to investigate the Krakoan Gate on Genosha because they're hearing about shenanigans. They fight back waves of plants and zombies, kind of like Plants versus Zombies. They're doing a little tower defense. And then the end of the issue, the angry plant ladies from one of those issues of X-Men show up. I don't know. This was fine. Is there going to be any actual exploration of the ethics of the zombie Genosians, though? I assume so. I hope so. But basically what we have here is, yes, they're zombies, but like, I'm pretty sure it's like basically implied that at least, Magic and M are just like chopping up these undead mutants who were like, their fellow citizens in their past major status quo, similar to their current one. And then, where does Scarlet Witch come back in this? Because she did this, what seems like a very major thing, and then she's not seen in the rest of the issue, she's just not seen in the present, is this weird, stupid tie-in miniseries to an event going to make Scarlet Witch a mutant again? Are the mutants going to resolve things between them and her over M-Day and stuff like that? I don't know. Tune in next time on X-Men.
Yeah. I liked it. I like the fact that Hickman is bringing in his plots from other things he set up in X-Men. So it's cool to see Horticulture back, the old woman, like grandmas that are evil. So that's cool to see them, and it makes perfect sense for why they're here, because they have the whole thing with plants as their kind of gimmick. So that's nice to see. I also like to see M. It's fun to see Monet again. As I feel like she hasn't been seen since like X Factor and Peter David's days. So that's cool to see. I am interested to see where they go. The whole plants versus zombies again kind of gimmick is kind of fun, but I'm wondering where it's going. It's not bad though. I also thought the art was pretty good too. I like the art as well.
I mean, this was fine. I did like Hickman bringing the previous plot stuff, but you could have put this in X-Men number 12 or whatever. Yeah.
Would be number 10 is the next issue of X-Men. I think it's next week.
Yep. All right. Next X-Men corner book, New Mutants number 11, Ed Brisson and Flaviano. I'm not sure the status on Hickman on this book moving forward. He might be entirely off it. I don't remember shit from when we last read this. I think this is the first issue post-pandemic. They've been in Russia. There's a trippy nightmare Russian girl, and they took Wildside to help them with it for some reason. They're surrounded by the military, and they're on camera, and they're about to surrender when Magic saves the day, and obviously she's Russian, so she's like, fuck you. And then they're back on Krakoa, trying to figure out how to integrate this new character to their society, and also how to recover, heal their wounds and everything like that. So they put the little rascal twins in charge of keeping watch on the new girl, because based on her powers, basically she's not allowed to fall asleep. Or if she does, they have to figure something out real quick. So these little kids who have already shown that they're fucking whippersnappers, erasing the minds of Beak and his family, they're in charge. So that's not going to be good. And there's also a website, a blog called Docs, which of course, rhymes with all the Hoxpox mess, but it's also Docs, and it's devoted to doxing mutants, which we've already seen hinted at, and it references when it was hinted at. And that ties into this arc, generally the Cartel / Beak one, and I'm sure that'll be interesting going forward. And you could definitely read some meta elements into this whole, dox thing, doxing mutants, especially within the comics industry, as it were. But it was a fun issue.
Yeah, it's a fine issue. This is actually the second issue post-pandemic. the last issue before this ended with them getting trapped in like that nightmare world, so you didn't miss much. I will say though, I think Flaviano, I love the art in this book and the colors. I arguably say this is the best color work in comics right now, or at least from Marvel. It's always striking and visually interesting, which really makes everything pop. This cover was insane too. It was a beautiful cover.
Yeah, there's some trippy art, especially like kind of when the nightmare culminates or like the climax of it. There's like a bunch of like teddy bears and shit like that have come into fruition and are just stumbling around. Yeah. There's some cool stuff there. And I think Flaviano is a pretty diverse artist as well. And the colors have shown some diversity as well, because when we were in that Beak segment, it was a lot more like, most of that was daytime, where Beak and his family was in the middle of a field, and it was always sunny, and it was a lot warmer colors. And now here with this Russia thing and this Nightmare Girl, it's all dark until it gets all trippy. So yeah, I think Flaviano is pretty underrated on this. Again, I don't know the status of both Hickman and Rod Reis, who were both bringing a different flavor to this book that I was also enjoying.
Yeah, but I mean, if it's Ed Brisson going forward, I mean, I remember back when the first press release came out that Hickman was very. I remember the quote being like, "This is Ed Brisson's book. I'm just kind of guessing." So it might be Brisson across the board now, and I'm fine with that because I've enjoyed the Brisson issues more than the Hickman issues for my personal taste. But that's just me, obviously, because I have more of a familiarity with the newer characters than the original New Mutants. But everyone's favorite mutant, Wolverine. Or most overrated mutant, or most hated, to pick one. He fits all of them. This is Ben Percy and Adam Kubert. This looks to be the finale of Logan dealing with the Pale Girl and the drugged flower petals cartels that we saw at the beginning back in issue 1. Wolverine gets Magneto drunk so he can steal his helmet for him to make his plan against the cartel and the Pale Girl, and he needs the helmet so she can't get into his head telepathically. So then he uses the Cuckoos to get Kid Omega to help him, and teams up with the Marauders to basically just stow away in a ship and basically Trojan horse the cartel. So we get a weird visual of Logan with Magneto's helmet on while he's fighting, which it's kind of kooky and fun, but it is like visually weird at first. He's able to beat the Pale Girl and save Jeff Bannister, who's the CIA agent that we've seen he's been teaming up with to get to take down the cartel. Also, remember his daughter was sick, so he was able to. At the end, he gets the drugs for his daughters to survive, the Krakoan miracle drugs, and then ending sees him hanging out with them as they get pizza. As Sage calls him to come forward as the Quiet Council's meeting on his actions for what happened out there, because drugging Magneto and stealing his helmet and kind of going off this rogue mission that he puts together on his own. And Bannister wants Logan to realize he's more than just this animal and not dwell on his past actions, which it's things we've explored before with Wolverine. And he's like, hey, I've seen you actually the real you, and you helped my daughter, you helped me, even through I've seen you killing your team accidentally and stuff, and you were able to come out of that, and you're not this bad guy. But also, Percy's been very introspective with the way Wolverine's thinking now. With Krakoa being this paradise, it's kind of shifting this new era for him where he can be more of a man who's kind of calm and peaceful and putting together a plan, which is what he did here, and not rushing in and just getting scorched. But I have healing powers, so I won't be just instantly killed. So we also get hints that this cartel goes deeper than the surface with connections to Russia, as they might have set up this rogue mutant nation gathering. One of the text pages is Beast dispatching Colossus and Omega Red to investigate what's exactly going on in Russia, which I tend to see what's going to go happen there later, as I think Omega Red was in issue 1 of this too, so there was set up there with Omega Red. But that's Wolverine. I think Adam Kubert's art, this is one of his stronger issues on art here. I really, really like his character work on Wolverine here. It is, still cool to see Adam Kubert drawing Wolverine, after 20, 25 years. Any thoughts on this, Vince? I know you're not reading Wolverine, or any interest at all, or nah?
No,
no, not at all. And finally, X-Men Fantastic Four, number 4. It's the finale to this 4-issue miniseries. as we see the X-Men and Fantastic Four team up, take on Doom's Sentinels that we saw at the end of the last issue as he dispatched them. Kate Pryde intercepts Doom and stops the device from his procedure that he was doing on Franklin's powers. And when Franklin learns that Sue went out to help, instantly ends the conflict because Franklin's just a huge Deus Ex Machina anyway. He's and it's here where Franklin decides that he will go to Krakoa to learn more about his powers and why they're fading. So flash forward, we see Franklin coming back home to visit his family, and we also see Val talking to Doom, and she's like, "Hey, I totally saw that you were stealing Franklin's energy to siphon it to use for a weapon later down the line, and I got rid of that." And so we get more of the Val and Doom complicated relationship that's always been kind of a fun thing going back to the Hickman run. But Magneto and Charles also go back with Franklin to the FF's headquarters. They're not in the Baxter building now. I forget. I think they're on Yancey Street, right? They have a whole hotel or something. That's the gimmick now. But they reveal that to Reed and his lab that they know about Reed's mutant gene masking inhibitor device that he used on Franklin, and it must be destroyed. So Charles wipes Reed's mind so that he will never be able to rebuild it. And this was like a courtesy warning to Reed. Even Charles even mentions back their time on the Illuminati. He's like, "Hey, if that was still happening, I would have just wiped your mind entirely, but I want you to remember this so you don't try to cross this again." So this ends on that note where it seems like the X-Men and FF are cool, except for Reed. And that's Reed making his own problems for himself. But I liked it, and I liked the kind of the stern warning. And the take here is that don't cross the X-Men again, because also your kid is a mutant and he's one of us. But the 4-issue miniseries, I don't know if it was the pandemic stopping the flow of the issues, but I this kind of petered out after really issue 2 for me, and I was just staying on to see what the heck was gone on and happening with it. But near the end, also I feel that the Dodson's art it got worse every issue, and by this point it doesn't even look like his X-Men stuff. But I did get some like X-Men Matt Fraction vibes in a couple of the scenes, but that's mostly just for the characters that were on the page. But final thoughts on X-Men Fantastic Four?
Yeah, the art, like you said, art was pretty inconsistent, sloppier with each issue. And yeah, on the Fraction note, there is like one panel where you see Cyclops standing next to Emma Frost, and I'm like, no. But there's also this thing just has a schedule fuckery because Kitty Pryde is dead at the bottom of the ocean, and then there was a pandemic, so that was like 8 months ago. And somehow I guess this entire series has to be before that, or maybe it's way after. Who the hell knows? Because then the whole Franklin thing, it's like I don't fully understand it. Like he's now living in Krakoa, like that's his home now. But I guess he goes home for dinner. Like, I mean, they don't say like whether it's every night or once a week or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But he's constantly with the FF, but he lives on Krakoa. But obviously and again, I don't read the Fantastic Four book. I could be totally wrong, but he's at least a supporting character in the Fantastic Four book ongoing, which is now converging with this giant Empyre event thing where even though he got, shoved away in the first issue, he is presumably going to, play a role. I don't know. I don't really care about Franklin interacting with the X-Men at all either. So, and that was like the whole point of this series. So it's like, I don't want him on Krakoa. It's not really that interesting to me.
I'm more interested to see how many writers and artists point out that he is on the island. So that'll be interesting to see going forward. Or like, do we see him in the background when everyone's partying or whatnot? But
it's Franklin Richards. He shouldn't be in any background. So if you're going to put him in the background, he shouldn't be there at all.
That's true.
Again, just getting on my boomer chair. Like this could have been 2 issues. Honestly, this could have been 1 issue in the X-Men book, and it would fit in the title called X-Men. And if it was only 1 issue or 2 issues for the Dodsons to draw, and if Jonathan Hickman was writing it, and obviously Hickman connection with Doom, connection with Franklin, current lead of the X-Men house, this would be probably so much more worthy and better story.
Yeah, but it wasn't that, and we go amongst our lives afterward.
Yeah, and I'm not dissing Zdarsky. I like what Zdarsky.
No, you're not.
But this would have fit a lot better, more contained, more refined, and with Hickman.
And I think when it was announced, it felt like Attack On too. It was like, oh, all right.
Yeah, I mean, this is at the point where they were like, how many X-Men books can we announce before fans revolt?
Yeah.
And then towards the tail end, like 2 of the X-Men books they announced, fans were like, and then the pandemic hit. So.
Well, you tried Hellions. Hellions number 2 came out this week, and you didn't continue on with that. And then X Factor number 1 is next week. So
I don't think I'm going to try it.
I'll try X Factor because of the writer and the team. So,
but like, again, no offense at all to any of the creatives or anything like that, but like this Children of the Atom thing, where it's like a school book with entirely new characters that are like literally cookie cutter, like echoes of the original 5. It's like, whose idea was this? We already have 10 books.
Yeah, it's too many books.
And we have 300 characters that are also not even in those 10 books. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah,
I've lost the steam.
I think I'm losing the steam. So we'll see how many books we read as the months continue on. But that is the show for this week. Dan, you're back after we talked X-Men for like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
I have to ask you before we go into picks of the week. Do you feel like you've dodged a bullet avoiding X-Men Corner?
Yes, I called it how many months ago? I told you I was going to not read this because I want to wait for the trades, and it looks like my decision has paid off.
Well, but now are you going to buy the 20 trades that they're releasing?
Yeah. What way are you going to buy it? Are you going to buy it by the books that contain all the books in the series, or are you going to buy the Dawn of X books where it's one book from every series?
Depends on what Books A Million gets.
Yeah,
that's the true answer.
Yeah, but then you're gonna find like volume 3 and 7, and then for cheap and buy those, and then you're gonna pay regular price for the rest, and it's gonna be a dumb decision.
The other ones I'll go to Second and Charles for. So.
All right, pick of the weeks, I guess.
Picks of the week, Vince.
Well, I hated everything I read again, so my pick of the week is going to be.
First of all, that's not true. You praised like 3 things.
I did everything. Damn.
So my pick of the week is going to be Empyre number 2.
All right. Empyre takes Vince's slot 2 weeks in a row.
Okay.
Dan.
Daredevil. Not even close.
Yeah. I'm going to give mine to Empyre Avengers. It wasn't the best thing I read this week, but it was the most fun this week, seeing all those characters that haven't been used in a while again. So that's, 2 down for Empyre, and then Daredevil, which has been a staple pick for pick of the week, which is not surprising at all. But, like I said, they're excited to see where Daredevil goes. Empyre Avengers was fun. We'll see how many more issues of Empyre until we're completely burnt out of it. But that's the show this week. So, as we bid you adieu, remember to please wash your hands, wear a mask when you go outside, practice social distancing, and enjoy baseball now that that's back for however long that lasts before that might get shut down again.
Basketball's in like 1 week, I think.
Yep.
Basketball is 1 week, and then August 1st, the NHL comes back. So, the NBA's got the bubble, and NHL's up in Canada, so we'll see if we get sports back, but I don't really know. We'll see. But there will be comics next week. That's one thing that's guaranteed.
Well,
until then,
it's not real.
No, that's true. That is true. All right, we're done. That's the show.